Have you ever noticed how quickly it can happen? You pick up your phone just for a moment. Maybe you're waiting for coffee or sitting on the bus or taking a break from work. You open an app, start scrolling, and suddenly you feel a little bit worse about yourself. A friend just bought a new car. Someone from school got promoted. A person you barely know is on vacation in a beautiful place. And there you are, looking at your own life, wondering why it doesn't look like that, wondering what you're doing wrong. This feeling is so common that almost everyone experiences it. But we don't talk about it much. We just feel it quietly and keep scrolling. Today we're going to explore why we compare ourselves to others. Not to make you feel bad about it, but to help you understand it. Because once you understand why your mind does this, you can start to change how it affects you. If you enjoy these conversations about everyday life and the mind, subscribing helps more people find content like this. But for now, let's just talk. Here's something interesting. You don't compare yourself to everyone. You probably don't look at a professional athlete and feel bad that you can't run as fast as them. You don't see a famous chef on television and feel like a failure because your dinner isn't perfect. But you do compare yourself to your coworker, to your old classmate, to your neighbor, to people who seem just a little bit like you, but doing a little bit better. Why is that? It's because comparison isn't really about them. It's about you. Your brain is trying to answer a question. Am I doing okay? And to answer that question, it looks at people who are similar to you. People in your age group, people in your field of work, people in your city. Your mind is basically asking, compared to people like me, how am I doing? And here's the tricky part. The comparison often makes you feel worse, not better, even when your life is actually going well. Let me tell you about someone. Let's call her Maria. Maria had a good job, good friends, a nice apartment. By most measures, she was doing fine. But every day, she would look at what other people were doing, and she would feel like she was falling behind. Her friend bought a house. Maria felt pressure to buy a house too, even though she liked renting. Her brother started his own business. Maria felt like maybe her regular job wasn't impressive enough. Her former classmate posted about a trip to Japan. Maria felt like she should be traveling more, even though she was saving money for something else. None of these comparisons helped Maria. They just made her feel anxious and uncertain. She started making decisions based on what other people were doing, not what she actually wanted. This is what comparison does. It takes your attention away from your own path and puts it on everyone else's path. And the problem is, you can't walk two paths at the same time. Think about that for a moment. When you're looking at someone else's life, wondering why yours doesn't match it, you're not actually building your own life. You're just watching theirs. Now, you might be thinking, but isn't some comparison normal? Isn't it human? Yes, absolutely yes. And that's exactly what we're going to explore next. Why your brain does this in the first place. Because it's not a weakness or a flaw. It's actually built into how humans think and learn. In the next part, we'll look at the psychology behind comparison. We'll understand why this happens automatically and why fighting it completely is almost impossible. But understanding it, that's where the power is. So why do we do this? Why does our brain automatically compare us to other people? The answer is actually quite simple. For most of human history, knowing where you stood in your group was a survival skill. Imagine living thousands of years ago in a small community, maybe 50 people, maybe 100. Everyone knew everyone, and in that group you needed to know, am I contributing enough? Am I learning the skills others have? Am I keeping up? If you saw someone who was better at hunting, you paid attention. You learned from them. If you saw someone who knew how to make fire faster, you watched what they did. Comparison wasn't about feeling bad. It was about learning and surviving. Your brain still works this way. When you see someone doing something well, part of your mind says, "Pay attention to this. This might be important." The problem is the world has changed, but your brain hasn't. You're no longer in a small village where you know everyone's full story. You're in a world where you can see thousands of people, strangers from everywhere, showing you tiny pieces of their lives. And your ancient brain still treats them like they're part of your tribe. It still tries to measure you against them. This is why a stranger's vacation photo can make you feel bad. Your logical mind knows this person is just someone on the internet, but your ancient brain sees them as part of your group, and it asks, why aren't we doing that? Here's another important piece. Your brain doesn't just compare randomly. It compares you to people who are slightly ahead of you. This is called upward comparison. You don't usually look at people who are struggling more than you and feel better about yourself. Well, sometimes you might, but it doesn't last. Most of the time, you look up. You look at people who have what you want or what you think you should want. And this makes sense from a learning perspective. If you want to improve, you look at someone who's a little bit better than you. That person shows you what's possible. A young musician doesn't compare themselves to someone who's never touched an instrument. They compare themselves to someone who's been playing for a few more years. That's natural. That's helpful. But here's where it gets complicated. That helpful comparison only works if you use it to learn. If you look at that better musician and think, what can I learn from them? That's useful. But if you look at them and think, I'll never be that good, why do I even try? Now, comparison has become a problem. Let me give you an example. Two people, same age, both learning to cook. Let's call them Daniel and Sophie. Daniel watches a cooking video. The person in the video makes a beautiful meal. Everything looks perfect. Daniel thinks, that's interesting. I wonder how they cut the vegetables so evenly. Maybe I should practice my knife skills. Sophie watches the same video. She thinks, my food never looks like that. I'm terrible at this. Why can't I make things look nice? Same video, same situation, different response. Daniel used comparison as information. Sophie used it as judgment. And here's the thing. Both responses are normal. Both happen to everyone. The difference is what you do next. Your brain is going to compare. It's built that way. You can't stop it completely, but you can notice when it's happening. You can catch yourself and ask, am I learning something here, or am I just making myself feel bad? Think about the last time you felt jealous or envious of someone. Really picture that moment. What were they doing? What did they have? Now ask yourself, did that feeling help you in any way? Did it motivate you to improve? Or did it just sit there making you feel worse? For most people, most of the time, comparison doesn't motivate. It just discourages. But understanding why it happens, that's the first step to changing how it affects you. Your brain is doing what it was designed to do. It's trying to help you survive and improve. It just doesn't know that seeing 100 success stories a day isn't actually useful information anymore. In the next part, we're going to look at what happens when comparison becomes a constant habit, what it costs you, what it takes away. Because before we can change something, we need to see clearly what it's doing to us. When comparison becomes a habit, it doesn't just make you feel bad for a moment. It starts to change how you live. Let me tell you about someone. We'll call him James. James worked in marketing. He was good at his job. He made enough money. He had ideas he was proud of. But James spent a lot of time on LinkedIn, looking at what other people in his field were doing. Every day he saw posts. Someone got a new job at a bigger company. Someone won an award. Someone spoke at a conference. Someone's campaign went viral. And every day, James felt a little bit smaller. He started thinking his own work wasn't good enough. He stopped sharing his ideas because they seemed boring compared to what others were doing. He felt anxious about his career, even though his boss was happy with him. The strangest part? James's life hadn't actually gotten worse. Nothing bad had happened. He just spent so much time looking at other people's highlights that his own real life started to feel like it wasn't enough. This is the hidden cost of constant comparison. It doesn't just make you feel bad in the moment. It changes what you see as valuable. It changes what you think is worth doing. Think about it this way. If you spend an hour every day looking at people who seem more successful, more attractive, more interesting than you, what happens to your mind? You start to believe that where you are isn't good enough, that what you're doing doesn't matter, that you need to be somewhere else doing something else before your life can really start. This is what psychologists sometimes call destination thinking, the idea that happiness and satisfaction are always somewhere ahead of you, just out of reach. I'll be happy when I get that promotion. I'll feel good about myself when I look like that. I'll be successful when I have what they have. But here's the problem. When you get there, the destination moves. There's always someone else ahead, always another level, always something more to achieve. James eventually got a promotion. You know what happened? He felt good for about a week. Then he started looking at people who were one level above his new position. The comparison just shifted. The feeling of not enough came right back. Comparison steals something else too. It steals your attention. Every minute you spend thinking about what someone else has is a minute you're not spending on building what you want. Every hour you spend feeling envious is an hour you could have used to practice, to learn, to create, to rest, to enjoy what's already in your life. Let's say you want to write a book. That's your goal. But instead of writing, you spend time looking at people who already published books. You read their success stories. You see how many copies they sold. You look at their book tours and interviews. How much writing did you do? None. The comparison gave you nothing except a feeling. And that feeling probably wasn't, I'm inspired to start. It was probably, they're so far ahead, what's the point? This is the trap. Comparison feels like you're doing something. It feels like research, like motivation, like staying informed. But really, it's just distraction dressed up as productivity. Here's another cost that people don't talk about much. Comparison makes it harder to be happy for other people. When your friend gets good news, part of you wants to be excited for them. But another part of you, the comparing part, feels threatened. Like their success means something about your failure. This is painful. Because you're not a bad person. You don't want to feel jealous of your friends. But when you're in the habit of comparing, it's hard to turn off. You end up feeling two things at once. Happy for them and bad about yourself. And that's exhausting. Maria, the woman we talked about earlier, told me something once. She said, I realized I hadn't felt purely happy for someone in years. Every time something good happened to a friend, I felt this weight in my chest, like their good news was somehow bad news for me. That's what constant comparison does. It turns other people's lives into evidence against yours. And the saddest part? It doesn't even work. All that comparing, all that measuring yourself against others, it doesn't make you better. It doesn't make you improve. It just makes you tired. You can't build a good life while constantly looking at someone else's blueprint. You can't run your race while watching everyone else's. So what do we do about it? Well, first, we need to understand what makes it worse. And in today's world, there's one thing that makes comparison harder than it's ever been. We're going to talk about that next. Social media has changed comparison in a way that's hard to overstate. It's not just that we compare more, it's that we're comparing ourselves to something that isn't even real. Let me explain what I mean. 30 years ago, if you wanted to compare yourself to someone, you had limited options. You could compare yourself to people in your town, your workplace, maybe people you saw on television. But television was different. You knew those people were actors, celebrities, far away from your real life. Most of your comparison happened with people you actually knew. Your neighbor, your coworker, your cousin. And because you knew them, you saw their full lives. You saw them on good days and bad days. You saw when things went wrong. You saw the whole picture. Now, you can compare yourself to thousands of people you've never met. People from other countries, other industries, other lives completely. And you don't see their full picture. You see what they choose to show you. Think about what you post online. Do you post a photo when you're tired and confused and don't know what you're doing? Probably not. You post the good moment, the nice meal, the fun trip, the achievement, the moment when everything worked out. Everyone does this. It's normal. It's natural. But here's the problem. When you're scrolling, you're not thinking about this. You're not reminding yourself, these are just the highlights. These are just the best moments. Instead, your brain sees it and thinks, this is their life. This is what their days look like. And then you look at your own day, the full day with all the boring parts, the difficult parts, the parts where nothing special happened, and you think, why doesn't my life look like that? You're comparing your behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel, and that's not a fair comparison. Let me tell you about Sophie. Sophie loved photography. She would post her photos online, and people would leave nice comments. But Sophie also spent hours looking at other photographers, people with more followers, better cameras, more interesting lives. One day, she met one of these photographers in person, someone whose work she really admired, someone whose life looked perfect online. They talked for a while, and this photographer said something that surprised Sophie. She said, "You know, I almost quit last year. I was so stressed. Nothing was working. I felt like a failure most days." Sophie was shocked. "But your posts? Everything looks amazing. You're always traveling, doing interesting projects." The photographer laughed. "Those are the good days. Or even just the good hours. I don't post about the rest. Nobody wants to see that." This conversation changed how Sophie looked at social media. She realized everyone was doing the same thing, showing the peaks, hiding the valleys. The problem is, when everyone hides their struggles and only shows their successes, it creates a world that doesn't exist. A world where everyone is happy, successful, and living their best life all the time. And you're the only one who knows that's not true for you. You know your struggles. You know your doubts. You know the days when nothing goes right. So you think you're the only one struggling. You think everyone else has figured it out except you. But that's not reality. That's just what social media looks like. Here's another thing that makes it worse. On social media, you can see updates from someone's life without context. Your old classmate posts that they started a company. You feel behind. But you don't know that they're stressed every day, or that the company isn't making money yet, or that they're worried it might fail. Someone posts about their new relationship. You feel lonely, but you don't know if that relationship is actually healthy or if they're just showing the good parts. Someone shares their workout progress. You feel lazy, but you don't know that they hate their job And exercise is the only thing that makes them feel in control. You see the outcome, you don't see the cost. And this matters because comparison only makes sense when you see the full picture. If someone has something you want, but they paid a price you wouldn't want to pay, is that really something to envy? Maybe that person with the impressive career works 70 hours a week and never sees their family. Maybe that person with the perfect body is obsessed with food and can't relax. Maybe that person who's always traveling is running away from something. I'm not saying these things to judge them. I'm saying them so you understand. You don't actually know what anyone else's life is really like. You only know what they show you. And if you're going to compare yourself to something, at least compare yourself to something real. So what can you do? Well, you can start by being aware. Notice when you're scrolling and that feeling starts, that feeling of not enough. Just notice it. Say to yourself, this is the highlight reel. This isn't the full story. That small awareness can change everything. In the next part, we're going to look at something important. Because not all comparison is bad. Sometimes looking at what others do can actually help us. The question is, how do we tell the difference? Here's something that might surprise you. Comparison isn't always harmful. Sometimes looking at what other people do can inspire you, teach you, help you grow. The question is, what makes the difference? Why does comparison sometimes motivate us and sometimes just make us feel terrible? Let me show you what I mean. Imagine two scenarios. First scenario. You see someone who learned to speak a new language. You think, that's amazing. I've always wanted to do that. Maybe I could start with just 10 minutes a day. Let me look up some resources. Second scenario. You see the same person, but this time you think, I could never do that. They're probably smarter than me. I tried learning a language once and gave up. I'm just not good at these things. Same person, same achievement, completely different response. In the first scenario, you used comparison as inspiration. You saw what was possible and thought about how you could move toward it. In the second scenario, you used comparison as evidence against yourself. You saw what was possible and decided it proved something was wrong with you. This is the key difference. Helpful comparison asks, what can I learn from this? Harmful comparison asks, what does this say about me? Let me give you another example. Two friends, both runners. Let's call them Alex and Chris. Alex watches videos of professional runners. He notices their form, how they breathe, how they pace themselves. He thinks, I'm not at that level, but I can work on my breathing technique. That might help. Chris watches the same videos and thinks, I'll never run that fast. Why do I even bother? I'm so slow compared to them. Alex is comparing to learn. Chris is comparing to judge himself. And here's what happens over time. Alex gets a little bit better because he's paying attention to what works. Chris gets discouraged and might even stop running. So how do you know which type of comparison you're doing? Ask yourself this. After you compare yourself to someone, do you feel energized or depleted? Do you feel curious about how they did it, or just bad that you didn't? Do you think about next steps you could take, or do you just feel stuck? If you feel energized and curious, that's helpful comparison. If you feel depleted and stuck, that's harmful comparison. There's another type of comparison that can be useful. Comparing yourself to who you were in the past. This is completely different from comparing yourself to other people. When you look at your own progress, you're working with real information. You know the full story. You know what you struggled with. You know what you've overcome. Let me tell you about Daniel. Daniel wanted to get better at public speaking. He was terrified of it. The first time he had to give a presentation at work, his hands shook, his voice cracked. He felt like he failed. But he didn't compare himself to the confident speakers around him. Instead, He decided to compare himself to himself. 6 months later, he gave another presentation. His hands still shook a little, but less. His voice was steadier. He didn't forget what he wanted to say. Was he as good as the natural speakers in his office? No. But was he better than he was 6 months ago? Absolutely. That's the comparison that mattered. Not, am I as good as them, but am I better than I was? This type of comparison is powerful because it's based on something you can actually control. You can't control how talented someone else is. You can't control their opportunities or their advantages, but you can control your own effort and growth. Think about something you've been working on. Maybe it's a skill, maybe it's a habit, maybe it's just trying to be more patient. Now ask yourself, am I better at this than I was a year ago, 6 months ago, even a month ago? If the answer is yes, even a small yes, that's real progress. That's something no comparison to anyone else can take away from you. But here's the tricky part. Even when you know all this, harmful comparison still happens. Your brain still does it automatically. So what do you do when you catch yourself in that moment? When you're looking at someone else's success and feeling bad about yourself? First, just notice it. Don't judge yourself for it. Don't think, I shouldn't feel this way. Just recognize, oh, I'm comparing myself right now. I'm feeling envious. Second, ask yourself, is there something useful here? Maybe there is. Maybe you can learn something from what they did. Maybe their path shows you something you want to try. But if there's nothing useful, if it's just making you feel bad, then it's okay to look away. Close the app. Stop reading. Redirect your attention. You don't have to consume everything. You don't have to know what everyone is doing. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is just stop looking. If you're still here listening to this, you probably care about understanding yourself better, about living with more intention and less anxiety. That matters. In the next part, we're going to talk about something practical. How do you actually shift from comparing yourself to others to focusing on your own path? What does that look like in daily life? So how do you actually make this shift? How do you stop measuring your life against everyone else's and start paying attention to your own path? It's not about willpower. You can't just decide, I'm never going to compare myself to anyone again and have it work. Your brain doesn't work that way. Instead, it's about creating new habits. Small changes in what you pay attention to and how you think about progress. Let's start with something simple. Define what success means for you. I know that sounds obvious, but most people skip this step. They have a vague feeling about what they want, but they've never actually put it into words. And when you don't have your own definition, you use everyone else's. You see what other people value, and you assume you should value it too. So take a moment and think. What actually matters to you? Not what should matter. Not what matters to your parents or your friends or society. What matters to you? Maybe it's having time with your family. Maybe it's learning new things. Maybe it's creating something. Maybe it's helping people. Maybe it's financial security. Maybe it's adventure. Whatever it is, be honest about it. Because here's what happens. If you don't know what you're aiming for, every direction looks equally valid. And that means every person who's going a different direction looks like they might be doing it better than you. But if you know what you want, then someone else's path only matters if it's going in the same direction. Let me give you an example. Let's say you value time. You want a life where you have space to think, to rest, to be with people you love. That's what success means to you. Now you see someone on social media. They're working 12-hour days, building a business, making a lot of money. They post about hustle and ambition. If you don't know what you want, you might feel bad, like you're lazy, like you should be working harder. But if you're clear that you value time more than money, then their path isn't better or worse than yours. It's just different. They're going north, you're going west. Both directions are fine, they're just not the same. This clarity doesn't make comparison disappear, but it makes it less powerful, because you're not confused about whether you should want what they have. Here's another practical step. Choose your own metrics for progress. Most people use metrics that society gives them: money, job titles, followers, likes. These things are easy to measure, so they're easy to compare, but they might not be measuring what actually matters to you. Let me tell you about a woman named Elena. Elena was a teacher. She loved teaching, but she felt bad about her career because teachers don't make much money. Her friends from university were making twice what she made, 3 times what she made. Every time she met up with old classmates, she felt small. Then one day, she started thinking differently. She asked herself, what am I actually trying to achieve? The answer was, she wanted to help young people think clearly and feel confident. That was her goal. So she created her own metric. At the end of each month, she would write down moments when she saw a student understand something difficult, or gain confidence, or change how they saw themselves. These were her measurements of success, not money, not status, moments of real impact. When she started tracking this, something shifted. She still noticed when her friends made more money than her. But it didn't hurt the same way, because she was measuring herself against her own goals, not theirs. Think about what you're trying to build in your life. Now think about how you could measure progress toward that in a way that's meaningful to you. Maybe it's not about how much money you saved, but whether you felt financially calm this month. Maybe it's not about how many projects you finished, but whether you learned something new. Maybe it's not about how you look, but whether you felt strong and healthy. When you choose your own metrics, you take back control of what success means. Here's another thing that helps. Limit what you consume. You don't need to see what everyone is doing all the time. You really don't. If social media makes you feel bad more often than it makes you feel good, use it less. Or use it differently. Unfollow people who trigger comparison. Follow people who teach you something useful. This isn't about running away from reality. It's about being intentional with your attention. Your attention is limited. Your energy is limited. Every minute you spend looking at someone else's life is a minute you're not spending on your own. And here's something else. Celebrate small wins in your own life. Most people wait for big achievements to feel proud. But big achievements are rare. If you only celebrate those, you'll spend most of your life feeling like you're not doing enough. Instead, notice the small things. You had a difficult conversation and handled it well. You tried something new even though it was uncomfortable. You were kind when you didn't have to be. These things matter. They're building who you're becoming. When you start noticing your own small wins, you become less dependent on comparing yourself to others. You have your own evidence that you're moving forward. Think about this week. What's one small thing you did that you're proud of? It doesn't have to be impressive to anyone else. It just has to mean something to you. That's your measuring stick, your own progress, your own path. In the next part, we're going to get even more practical. We'll talk about specific actions you can take when comparison shows up. Real things you can do in the moment when that feeling hits. Let's talk about what to do in the moment. When you're scrolling or talking to someone, or hearing about someone's success, and that feeling hits, that tightness in your chest, that quiet voice saying, "You're falling behind." What do you actually do? First, pause, just for a second. Notice what's happening. This sounds too simple to matter, but it's actually the most important step. Because most of the time, comparison happens automatically. You don't even realize it's affecting you until you've already spent 20 minutes feeling bad. So when you notice that feeling starting, just name it. Say to yourself, I'm comparing myself right now. You don't have to fix it yet. You don't have to make it go away. Just see it clearly. Here's what this does. It creates a tiny bit of space between the feeling and your reaction to it. And in that space, you can choose what to do next. Sometimes the best thing to do is nothing. Just let the feeling be there and keep moving. You see a post that makes you feel envious. You notice it. You think, okay, I'm feeling envious right now. And then you close the app and go do something else. You don't need to analyze why you feel that way. You don't need to fix yourself. You just redirect your attention. But other times it helps to ask a question. And here's a useful one. What am I really wanting right now? Because comparison is often a signal. It's your mind telling you that something matters to you. Let me show you what I mean. You see someone's art online and you feel jealous. What are you really wanting? Maybe you miss being creative. Maybe you used to draw or paint and you stopped. The jealousy isn't really about them. It's about something in you that wants attention. Or you see someone's relationship and feel lonely. What are you really wanting? Maybe connection. Maybe you've been isolated and you miss having someone to talk to. The comparison is just pointing at something that matters to you. So when you notice that feeling, instead of judging it, get curious about it. Ask, what is this telling me I care about? And then ask, what's one small thing I could do about that? If you miss being creative, maybe you could spend 20 minutes this week just drawing something. Anything. It doesn't have to be good. If you want connection, maybe you could text a friend you haven't talked to in a while. Or go somewhere where people gather. The comparison doesn't have to just make you feel bad. It can show you what direction to move in. Here's another practical thing. Change the question you ask. When you compare yourself to someone, your brain usually asks, why don't I have that? Try asking a different question instead. Do I actually want that? Or do I just think I should want it? Because sometimes we feel bad about not having things we don't even want. You see someone with a very busy, ambitious career. You feel bad that your career is quieter. But do you actually want that kind of career? Or are you just feeling like you should? You see someone who travels constantly. You feel bad that you stay home more. But do you actually want to travel that much? Or do you just think it looks impressive? Be honest with yourself. What do you actually want your life to feel like? And if the answer is, I genuinely want what they have, then the next question is, what's one step I could take toward that? Not, how do I get there immediately? Just, what's one step? If you want to travel more, maybe the step is looking at your budget to see what's possible, or researching one place you'd like to go. If you want a different career, maybe the step is talking to someone who works in that field, or taking one online class. Small steps break the paralysis that comparison creates. They turn, I'm so far behind, into, here's what I can do today. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus compared himself to other writers constantly. He would read someone's book and think, I'll never write anything that good. Why do I even try? One day, a friend gave him advice. She said, every time you feel jealous of another writer, write for 10 minutes. That's it, just 10 minutes. Not to finish anything, not to be perfect, just to write. At first, Marcus thought this was silly, but he tried it, and something strange happened. The jealousy started to feel different. It stopped being just a bad feeling. It became a reminder, a signal that said, you care about this. Go do it. Over time, he spent less time feeling envious and more time actually writing, and his writing got better because he was practicing instead of just comparing. The feeling didn't go away completely, but it became useful instead of just painful. Here's one more thing that helps. Practice being genuinely happy for other people. I know this is hard when you're in the habit of comparing, but it's worth practicing. When someone you know succeeds at something, try saying out loud, "That's great. I'm happy for them." Even if you don't fully feel it yet, say it anyway. Sometimes the feeling follows the words, and notice what happens when you do this. There's usually a small sense of relief, like you put down something heavy, because carrying envy around is exhausting. Being happy for people even when it's hard is actually lighter. You don't have to do this perfectly. Some days will be easier than others. But each time you practice, it gets a little bit easier to separate someone else's success from your own worth. Remember, their good news doesn't mean bad news for you. There's enough success to go around. Someone else winning doesn't mean you're losing. Next time you feel that comparison creeping in, try one of these things. Just one. See what happens. In our final part, we're going to talk about what becomes possible when you let go of constant comparison. What opens up when you stop running someone else's race and start walking your own path? There's a kind of freedom that comes when you stop measuring yourself against everyone else. It's quiet. It's not dramatic, but it changes everything. Let me tell you what it looks like. You stop checking how many likes something got. Not because you don't care at all, but because it doesn't define whether what you did mattered. You hear about someone's success and your first feeling is curiosity, not threat. You wonder how they did it instead of wondering why you didn't. You make choices based on what you actually want, not on what looks impressive. This doesn't happen all at once. It's gradual. Some days you slip back into old patterns. But slowly, over time, something shifts. You start to see your life as your own story, not as a chapter in someone else's book. Let me tell you about James again. Remember him? The marketing guy who spent all his time on LinkedIn comparing himself to everyone? He didn't quit social media completely. He didn't have some dramatic revelation. He just started paying attention differently. Instead of scrolling through everyone's achievements first thing in the morning, he started his day by writing down one thing he wanted to accomplish. Just one thing. Some days it was small. Answer emails thoughtfully, have a good conversation with his team, finish a draft of something he'd been avoiding. At the end of the day, he would ask himself, "Did I do that thing?" If yes, the day was successful. It didn't matter what anyone else posted. After a few months of this, something changed. He still saw other people's successes, but they didn't feel like they were about him anymore. Someone got promoted, that's good for them. Someone won an award, nice. Someone started a company, interesting. But none of it meant James was failing. It just meant other people were doing their thing while he was doing his. And here's what surprised him. Once he stopped comparing so much, he actually got better at his work. Because he was focused on improving his own skills instead of worrying about where he ranked. This is what happens when you run your own race. You have more energy for the actual running. Think about how much mental space comparison takes up. All those moments of scrolling, all those thoughts about how you measure up, all that energy spent on feeling behind. What could you do with that energy if it was freed up? Maybe you'd actually start that project you've been thinking about. Maybe you'd have deeper conversations with people you care about. Maybe you'd just feel calmer, less anxious about whether you're doing enough. There's something else that happens too. You become more yourself. When you're constantly comparing, you're constantly adjusting, trying to be more like this person or achieve what that person achieved. You're shape-shifting, trying to match some invisible standard. But when you let go of that, you can ask a different question. What do I actually enjoy? What feels right for me? And sometimes the answer is surprising. Maria, the woman from earlier who felt pressure to buy a house because her friends did, eventually realized something. She didn't actually want to own a home. She liked the flexibility of renting. She liked being able to move if she wanted to. But she'd spent years feeling bad about not wanting what other people wanted. Once she accepted that her path was different, she felt lighter. She stopped apologizing for her choices. She stopped explaining why she was doing things differently. She just lived her life. This is the freedom I'm talking about. Not freedom from ever noticing what other people do, but freedom from needing their path to validate yours. Here's something important to understand. Letting go of comparison doesn't mean you stop wanting things. It doesn't mean you lose ambition or drive. It just means you want things for your own reasons, not because someone else has them. You can still want to grow. You can still want to improve. You can still work hard toward goals. But you're doing it because it matters to you, not because you're trying to catch up to someone else. And when your motivation comes from inside yourself instead of from comparison, it's more sustainable. It lasts longer. It feels better. You're not running because you're afraid of falling behind. You're moving because you're interested in where you're going. There's a peace in that, a steadiness. Think about the people you admire most. Not the ones with the most impressive achievements necessarily, but the ones who seem comfortable in their own skin. The ones who aren't trying to be anyone else. What you're noticing is someone who's found their own measuring stick. Someone who knows what they value and lives according to that, regardless of what everyone else is doing. You can become that kind of person too, not all at once, not perfectly, but gradually. Every time you notice comparison and choose to redirect your attention, you're practicing. Every time you celebrate your own small progress instead of measuring it against someone else's big achievement, you're practicing. Every time you ask, what do I actually want, instead of what should I want, you're practicing. And over time, these small practices add up to a different way of living. A way where you're more present in your own life because you're not constantly looking at everyone else's. A way where you feel more grateful for what you have because you're not focused on what you don't. A way where you make choices with more clarity because you're not confused about whose life you're trying to live. If one thing from this conversation stayed with you, I'd love to know which one it was. Not because I need to know, but because sometimes saying it out loud helps you remember it. Your life is your own. Your timeline is your own. Your definition of success is your own. And the moment you truly believe that, everything gets a little bit easier. Thank you for listening to this. I hope something here was useful for you.